Let's get this thing rocking here. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the beginning of the program, beginning of the course. So today we're going to be looking at the preface, chapter 1, and the course outline, at least some elements of the course outline that you have dealing with the course Exploring Leadership. Now feel free to stop and ask questions. I will be asking you questions along the way, so that if you have anything you want to make a comment or contribution, feel free, but I will be asking questions along the way as well. Is everybody seeing the screen clearly enough, the words and whatnot?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
good. I would like to keep this sidebar open so that I can see if people have comments or if they raise their hands and they want to ask something or say something. All right. All right, so let's get going. So the first thing is the course description. This comes from the course outline. So the first thing we want to look at is the fact that this is an introductory course, not an in-depth course into leadership and ethics, and that is something that you need to be aware of, because we will not have enough time to be able to go into an in-depth study, because leadership is a discipline by itself. In terms of academic studies, it's an area in which you could do master's studies and PhD studies in. Okay. Now the course that we're going to do is going to be focused on developing your own. Well, first of all, we're going to be focusing a lot on your own experiences in leadership, and most of you all are at sergeant's levels or at authority levels in your organizations that give you the responsibility of exercising leadership. So this is going to be an important place for you to reflect upon your personal experiences in ethical leadership through primarily self-analysis. So one of the first things that the first assignment that we spoke about is self-analysis. So this course description identifies immediately one of the pieces of assessment that you're going to be dealing with. We're also going to go through, and that is also part of your self-assessment, an exploration of your personal value structures or value systems. That is an important element here, because the model of leadership that we're going to look at hinges heavily upon the value structures and the value systems that we have as the bedrock of our belief structures. And as much as possible, we're going to, well, not as much as possible, we're also going to be looking at the application of ethical decision making in your own behavior. Now, I know you all have done ethics before, and you'd have met some of the theory about ethics and ethical decision making. So we're going to be revisiting that, but we're going to be revisiting it from a practical application. All right, so it may be some repetition for you guys, but I think it's going to take you into the realm of self-evaluation in a lot more realistic sense. Now, in terms of the course objectives, learning outcomes that we say upon completion, you will be able to comprehend and apply various theories of leadership. That means we're going to examine them. We're going to find out more about them and hopefully understand them better. Comprehend, apply, and defend decisions using various tools of ethical decision making. So we are going to revisit the ethical decision making tools. One in particular we're going to pay attention to, and we're going to be able to use it to analyze past decisions and evaluate them in given that information. Create a plan that applies the general concepts of good governance. That is your final assessment, where you are required in that assessment to set up your leadership plan moving forward. From the end of the course moving forward, how would you seek to take what you've gotten from this course and apply it moving forward once you are okay with where we're going. Another objective is organization and teams, so that you demonstrate an awareness and understanding of group dynamics and teamwork. Now, there's a unit that is a chapter that is going to focus on this, but you should have already come across the concept of teams and team dynamics in OB and other classes like management as well. So therefore, what we want to do is to actually put this into practice. You've already been placed into small teams, and later on we'll go into a fairly large team to be able to do some work in relation to that. So again, there's practical applications in this course all across the board. Report on leadership issues facing our community, society, and the world at large. Those are things that we are going to be doing on a constant basis. As we evaluate or go through parts of the course, we will be looking at applying what we see to the world around us by first looking within our own personal experience and then trying to widen it out a little bit to look at our society. Now, the course is generally designed utilizing textbooks and stimulus material coming out of the United States because of the nature of how textbooks are written and generated. The concepts, therefore, would have to be translated into the Caribbean experience, and that is something that we're going to have to spend some time doing as much as possible in order to make it relevant for us in this particular context. And the final learning objective, which probably is the one that is most important, is that you'll be able to display and modify behaviors indicative of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethics. So at the end of the day, what we're hoping is that you're going to take from this course the information that we're going to be developing, the understanding that we're going to be developing, and the model that we're going to be looking at, and have it modify your personal behaviors. Now, this is a tall order because it means that we need to go through a process of you being able to assimilate the information, evaluate the information, and begin the process of behavior modification. Now, everybody here should understand the concept of behavior modification. Because I think vast majority of you all here are parents, so you engage in behavior modification activities all the time. Is that correct, guys? Barry, do you engage in behavior modification activities?
So I don't have any children.
You don't have any children?
No, sir.
Right, that doesn't mean you don't engage in behavior modification. Have you ever tried to change things about yourself or others around you?
Constantly.
Right, so what are you
Yeah.
doing to do that? Dixie, I see you want to join the conversation. Dixie, I'm sorry.
No, I said yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so Barry, what were you saying? How do you go about attempting to modify other people's behaviors?
First I try to understand the reason behind the actual behavior itself, and then based on what the actual reasoning is, we may have to have a discussion as to how we can go about making certain shifts.
Uh-huh.
If it's work, then there's a shift towards both the organization and the person be able to get mutually benefit. If it's at home, well,
Okay.
then it's the same thing.
So in a lot of instances, what you're using is external motivation. Especially in work. Work is related to, promotions, salaries, that kind of stuff. So that's an external. It's external to the individual. You understand what I mean with that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Do you find that sticks?
Not all the time.
Why not?
It depends on the person's personality.
It
Some
does, but
persons are more receptive to the information than others, and then some you might take a little longer.
uh-huh. All right. So let me see. Dixian was making a response in terms of agreement here. Dixian, you have children?
Yes, sir.
All right. So when you see behaviors in your children, how old are they, by the way? Let's get that context.
4 years, 9
All right.
and 17.
Ooh, okay. So you have the full spectrum. Um, so one of the things that you might see is a type of behavior that you don't like in one of, especially probably the teenager.
The older
Um,
one.
sorry?
The
Yes, the
older one,
teenager,
yeah.
the eldest, yes. And how do you go about making him or her change their behavior?
Well, first, it's all about with me. We talk about everything, and I lead by example with him.
All right,
So
that's good.
sometimes I may sit with him and explain, certain things that I went through, and I know the different age and then peer pressure. At this time now, we have friends, and I'm seeing him changing. So that is a challenge I'm going through right now.
Okay, because
So
the changes you're seeing are not something you like.
yeah.
All
So
right.
what I'm doing, I'm using my life experience when I was at his age. I know things will be different from his time and my time. Sorry. So I'll use myself as an example to see if I could get through to him. So far, it's working, but to a point.
All right, yes, because I mean, one of the things that experience teaches us is that you don't know something until you experience it. So
Yeah,
unfortunately, he's going to have to suffer some losses to be able to learn, and hopefully it wouldn't be losses he can't recover from, because that's the trouble now. Huh? In
yeah,
the past, we might have been able to do things, get away with it, and come back from it, but now things are so immediate and long lasting because, you know, the internet never lets anything down or forgets anything. So that is interesting. Now,
yeah,
what I wanted to talk about here was the difference between the approach, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to motivate the individual, your son that is, by affecting his internal motivations for behavior, by trying to get him to change his behavior, not because you said so, but because you're reasoning with him because of what you see as something coming down the road as being a potential problem or immediate problem. But you're trying to get him to internalize the need to want to do it. Now, this is the same issue that works. Now, at that age, internal motivation is more useful a tool for effecting change than when a child is younger. So, like your 4 year old or the 9 year old, punishment might be something that you could utilize, or rewards might be something you could utilize to encourage behaviors that you would like to see. Now, that's something that worked with us in the past, even up to being a teenager. You know, back in the days, the unfortunate thing with this, back in the days, the only kind of behaviors that was taken notice of was when we did bad things. If we did any good things, we didn't really get that much attention because they would say, well, that's what you expected to do. All right. But if anytime we did anything wrong, blues passing, and any kind of thing that they have in their hand, they can beat you with it. Trust me, I get beat with that Pyrex dish already. So that was really something else. But understand what I'm talking about. The quickest way to get people to do what you want is to threaten them with punishment or reward them with some sort of reward. But it doesn't hold, because once the rewards or the punishment is removed from the circumstance, then the person is likely to return to their normal behavior or what they consider normal. What works for a long-term method of behavior modification is appealing to somebody's internal value system, just for them to be able to accept that, really and truly, this is what I want to do. And I want to do this not for anybody else, but for myself. And that's what the objective of this course is designed to do. Fortunately, you all are adults, so the ability of this taking place is of a higher likelihood than me having to tell you all, if you don't do this, you can fail the course. That don't work. Trust me, that don't work. All right, would you agree with that, Gail?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced any form of personal behavior modifications in the past?
So many,
Utilize.
sir.
So
Many.
too many to
Yes.
mention. All right, I hear you. Yes, because I guess at our age, we've had to change our behavior in a lot of instances. All right, so the required textbooks are those that are listed here. I've shown you them in the previous class, and they are downloadable off the e-classroom. So I hope you've already downloaded them. All right, so that takes us into the introduction now into Unit 1 and the preface of of the discussion that we're dealing with. As I said before, what we're going to be paying attention to here is primarily one of the first things we're going to be looking at is the concept of leadership in our world in today's time frame, and the need for us to depart from the age-old concept of leadership being something that's inherent in an individual as opposed to something that can be developed in an individual. And as I said before, we need to bring the experience into the Caribbean context by using as much of the local and regional examples that we can find to help to support it. One of the reasons why we still struggle with this leaders being born or made situation is because whereas a lot of but even in the Western world, it's the same thing. The more developed countries, they've kind of moved into the area of leadership as a quality that can be developed. There's still this remnant of feeling that there are only special people who are born leaders, kind of things, and we need to try and realize that leadership is not a genetic state but a state of mind, and we need to understand that it's something that is developed or can be developed in everybody to whatever potential. And in fact, you all can engage in a debate about this later on your own as part of the debating exercise. It's one of the topics that we can look at in terms of exercising our debate functions. So we will be examining that in a lot of sense. The model that we are going to be looking at is actually something called the relational leadership model, and it stems from the way in which leadership is defined. In this particular model, the leadership is defined as a relational, ethical process of people coming together to accomplish change. Now, specifically, we're looking at positive change, but we know that there's also negativity involved. But we're going to be focusing on positive change, which is what the leadership program is going to be looking at. So, at the end of the day, the main takeaway from this definition is that leadership is about the quality of relationships. So if you were to reflect upon your past experiences with various leaders in your organizations, one of the things you might recognize is the the correlation between the nature of your relationship and the success levels of the outcomes that you've engaged in. So for most of us, we do better when we have better relationships with individuals and we are able to accomplish a lot more. But if we have adversarial relationships with people, it tends to hamper the outcomes that we are able to get sorted in that particular context. So I don't know many of you all if you can relate to that. Have you seen that correlation between the quality of relationships and the levels of success that you've engaged in? Ian, what about you?
Yes, sir. That is an important factor in leadership positions where one must work together. Together, it's not a sign of weakness. Working together, most persons think that when you're in a leadership position and you're working with probably your subordinates, it's a sign of weakness, and you don't let them just do it. And but you deal with them, guiding them, mentoring them. Most people see that as a form of weakness, but it is in this the 21st century. It is not like that. I think that leaders must come forward and do what they're supposed to do to ensure that the persons behind them or looking at them know that they have their back. And at one point in time, we were all in junior positions, and now that we are in the senior positions, when we were in the junior positions, we would say that we would like a leader. We had all kind of, how to put it, all kind of aspirations, all kind of um, views of a leader. But now that we are in leadership positions, we're supposed to be able to operate as the leader that we envisage as juniors. So yes, I agree with this, with your perspective in terms of the leadership positions by leaders and the positions leaders should take.
Okay, well, that's good. I think. Well, what I was really asking about was, have you made a correlation between successful outcomes and the quality of relationships?
Yes, sir.
All right. And this is from your own experience. So
Yes, sir.
what you're saying is that that is telling you that that's something you'd like to carry forward in your role now as a leader and your subordinates.
Yes, sir.
Right, good. So you're on track. So therefore, I hope others reflect a similar mentality, because the model that we're looking at, which is called the relational leadership model, or for short, we call it RLM model, um, it is de highly dependent on the nature of the relationship between leaders and the subordinates that they have. So we're going to come from the same position there. Now, when we look at leadership in general, we look at it through different frameworks. And one of the first frameworks we always look at is in politics. So when we talk about politics, political sciences look at leadership through two very important elements: power and influence. Now, there is one group that is going to examine a chapter specifically on power and influence, and that will bring us more information about this particular assessment of the political view of leadership. But in essence, what happens in the political environment is the individuals who end up in leadership positions have to do something to acquire power, and their focus would be on how they use that power to influence others to do the things they want. And whether or not that is from a position of being looking at the best for everybody or for themselves is dependent a lot on the quality of the individual that ends up in positions of power and how they end up in that position. So if we look at these pictures here, I want to bring us to these three here. These are three powerful people, powerful leaders. They represent the interests of different countries, and they are currently in a lot of conflict with each other. And each one had a different path to the position that they hold in their countries of power, and how they use their influence is different. So the President Biden came through a system of democratic elections to arrive at his position of power. So in essence, it's a game of favoritism, trying to appease as many people as possible. So there are dangers inherent in that system. The Russian Prime Minister, or President, I should say, or Premier as they prefer to be called, is arrived at a position of power by influencing the power blocks in his countries through favors and transactional approaches to acquire the support necessary for him to take control. So even though there's a form of elections there is a lot of influencing that goes on. And similar in China, where there is a type of voting that takes place, but only within the Communist Party. This gentleman here was able to arrive at a position of power by getting rid of his opponents. So each one arrived in positions of power from utilizing different techniques, those techniques that work within the systems that they find themselves operating in. So one is communist, one is an oligarchy, one is a democracy. So each one is a different circumstance. And each one is carrying forward what they see as the needs of their influencing the world around them to be able to meet the needs of their particular environments. So each one is coming to the World Forum with their own issues representing where the countries want to see themselves. So we can see immediately that because of the different approaches of acquiring their power and staying in power, they are able to influence other countries through other. So for those of us who pay attention to the geopolitical climate, you'd realize that China has a tendency to influence other countries to bend to their will through the use of investment. You all are familiar with that, right? They spend a lot of money around the world investing in the development of lesser states or lesser developed countries. And they then get them basically indebted to China, and then China kind of takes control of things. Russia, on the other hand, is using, or at this point in time, is using strong arm tactics of forcing people to get involved. And the United States does a combination of two things. It basically uses a form of cultural imperialism where it bombards you with the lifestyle of the United States and encourages you to get involved in this capitalism and with the concept of consumerism and pandering to people, what people want as opposed to what people need. And they use that as a bait and switch type of approach to attract countries to want to side with them. But again, it's also going to be specific countries because the only countries they really pay attention to are those that have something that they can get. Now, everybody is very selfish if we look at the way in which they behave. And what they try to do is they try to get themselves into organizations such as NATO and make sure that they influence the other leaders around the world to do the bidding that suits them. So you'd understand that it's important when we look at this situation here that these countries are positioning themselves and using what power they have to influence others to meet their requirements. And that's the nature of politics. Now, if we translate that into our local environment, we have a situation here where we have primarily two parties that supposedly represent two polarized positions in our society. Unfortunately, we still run this very old political system of those that are Afro-Trinidadian and Indo-Trinidadian, and we use that as the basic ground or grassroots type of approach to arriving at a position of leadership. What happens is you embolden any one of the groups by telling the one group that the other group has it in for them. And that fair tactic that is utilized is what allows a lot of people to well, doesn't allow, it encourages a lot of people to want to support one party as opposed to the other because they see the parties as representing their specific interests and looking after their specific fears of what is likely to happen. Now, we're going to be examining some of these serious issues here because we have to. This is the context we live in. And the issues that we find coming up here is that race politics in Trinidad and Tobago is extremely divisive and creates a lot of problems moving forward. So that a lot of people feel alienated by the political system when one party is in power. And we've had the experience of, for those of you who are about my age would remember when the PNM finally lost elections, what took place, and then ever since then, we've always had this trading of the guard kind of thing, one going in, one coming out, and there never seems to be any consistency in terms of it. What I've seen, though, from my own personal experience, it doesn't really matter who's in power. It's the same thing all the time. Would you agree with that? Anybody has any input they would like to make? I know it may not necessarily be something that you're comfortable addressing, but I'll encourage you, let us address the uncomfortable things now in the safety of a classroom, as opposed to, and hopefully get some sort of resolution out of it so that we can move forward in it. So if you have a comment that you want to make at this point, feel free to bring it up if you want to. No takers?
So
Yes.
So Kevin Frankton.
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, I would also say the US, right, also in my view uses strong arm tactics.
Yes, they do. Yes, but
You
what
know,
they try to make it what's the word I want to use? They want to use
using sanctions.
yes, but that's only when they feel highly threatened.
Yeah, they use sanctions to, rather than they go in, like it's like if what Russia did with Ukraine,
Uh-huh.
right? The US used sanctions. So basically it's overthrowing our government, it's kind of just,
Literally.
yeah,
So
it's
yeah. So it's
except
either
they're using a different tactic
yes. So
by
you
using
either
strong
take
arm
over the
tactics.
government um, through military means, or you take over the country utilizing consumerism, or you can also utilize it through threats, veiled threats of what will happen. That especially happens in smaller countries, Latin American countries in particular, have been historically um, dealt with in that fashion historically. So we could think about Nicaragua and Colombia and other places like that, where the U.S. government, even in Trinidad here, they come and they flex their muscles because they know that, okay, well, if we trade with you, you will get a lot of resources, but we want these things. We want access to your oil. We want access to your resources. We want access to your rainforest. We want access, and if we don't get them, you don't get our support.
Yeah, we
And
wanna
that's
we wanna we wanna put our base in your country.
correct. All of those things, military bases, anything that they want, there's a way in which they could do it. And China's using similar tactics by coming in there and saying, "Oh, well, we will help you build this and build that and develop your infrastructure. We'll lend you all this money and this thing, and you have, sweetheart deals." But when you start to have problems paying it back because you're not generating the kind of revenues you were, they come in and say, "Well, you haven't been able to pay us back, so we will take this instead." So they use almost like a bank approach to dealing with how they're dealing with things there. But I was more specific in terms of looking at our local environment, where how do you see that working?
Well, I agree that, I mean, the the selecting a government is um is all based on race, using the same you know this one against the other,
Hmm.
right? The politics never really addresses real issues. What they really address not even address is party politics,
Yes,
wine and we dance, and so going to a political event is essentially going to affect.
it's correct.
So
Yes,
is there's no real political issues, and I would say because of the history that we have, right, and the way that we approach politics, that is why the laws tend to lag way behind as to what are the needs of society, right, and have the laws be parallel to the desires of society as time passes.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's because the status quo is held. And one of the other things I forgot to talk about in terms of our local environment is the influence of the people in our society who control the economic resources in our system. Um, they have a lot of influence over who ends up in power and the kind of policies that they put in place, because they're the money, they control the purse string, so to speak. All right. And that's something that again we will have to engage with and discuss, because obviously it can't keep on going that way, because eventually things will come to a head. Maybe, maybe not, who knows, in my lifetime or otherwise. All right, so let's look at another method of looking at leadership, another framework. So this other framework here is in relation to how management looks at it. Hi, Natasha, you need to mute your microphone.
Sorry, sir.
That's
I know
okay.
join with you. I can now get you to join. Sorry.
Oh, not a problem. Natasha's coming in at a second at. All right, Natasha, you have two devices on. Huh? All right, so when we look at leadership through the perspective of management, what we're looking at here is outcomes based, because what management is concerned with is, at the end of the day, is profits. And the profits that they make is dependent upon the nature of the relationship between supervisors and subordinates. So management in particular pays attention to that. They look for the best relationship that they can utilize, but its effectiveness is measured primarily with how much money or profit we've made. Now let's look at this group of individuals here, and um, I'll make it bigger for us to see if we can identify and recognize as many of these people as possible. All of these individuals have shown themselves to be highly profitable and highly successful. All right, that's the listed top 20 business leaders in the world. But what is the nature of the relationship they have had with the people that they work with? So if we examine, for example, how many of you all recognize? Well, I have some problems recognizing some of them. So I know this guy, this guy, this guy, this lady here, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and these two people here. The others, this person gives me a bit of a, I think is somebody from the IMF, but the others I'm not too clear about. But let's deal with the ones that you know. Anybody knows any of the others that I didn't identify?
Yes, sir. Um, the from the top come down, the third row, right?
Uh-huh.
Second person, that is Elon Musk. Second person from the left,
Yeah, I said I knew who he was. Yes.
right? That is Jack Mao or Jack Mock or something like that. Richard Branson, right?
So
The
this
guy with
guy,
the I don't know that guy. That the him
right?
and the other three really on the left did Martha Stewart. I seen Martha Stewart is one of them.
Yeah, seeing Martha Stewart there.
The guy to the top, I don't know him. The first one at the left.
Yeah, I'm not sure who this guy
I
is.
don't know who he is.
No, this lady, I'm not, but she looks familiar, but I haven't been able to place her yet. But if we look at like, so this guy is Jeff Bezos here, right? He's synonymous with Amazon. He's made his millions of billions in Amazon and continues to make a lot of money. But as a business person, he's deemed to be one of the top business leaders in the world. But what is the condition under which his employees work? Yeah, all right, so we have that to think about. Yes, he makes a lot of money, but at what cost? This is Bill Gates. Bill Gates made his wealth in Microsoft by stealing other people's software, redesigning it, repackaging it, and then selling it back to people, and created a situation in which he was able to continually have money being made from the sale of his software, because not PCs wasn't where the money is. The software is where the money. Then got involved in this whole vaccination thing that went on with the COVID virus. He's found himself in a lot of hot water with that. So there's but he is known to be a hard taskmaster and very ruthless in his behavior. I'll come back to Richard Branson in a bit. Um, and Elon Musk, another leader who is business leader who is seen to be highly successful and pioneering, but is known to be arrogant and dismissive of his staff. Martha Stewart, somebody who was supposed to be hugely um, uh, successful, but at what cost? She went to jail because of insider trading, due to the way in which she conducted her business. This gentleman up here is the leader of or the owner of Facebook and all the affiliate type of things. He's well, first of all, um, was portrayed as somebody who was very socially inarticulate, but more importantly, has come under scrutiny for a lot of the um, privacy issues involved with the social media, social network. Jay-Z, very popular musician, but a lot of musicians accuse him of taking advantage of them and also having some sort of gangster backgrounds in his dealings as well. So though these people are all successful, they have bad raps coming with them. And is that a quality we want to hold um, in relation to hold it up to high esteem? We list these people as the top 20 business leaders in the world, according to this listing here, but at what cost? And what was given up as a result of it? You understand what my concern is in relation to that. So this is what I'm trying to say. Is this the kind of leader you want to be? Now, Richard Branson is a bit of a different story. This gentleman here, he rose to popularity and became successful only after failing a lot. But he's also known as probably one of the best people to work for, not the worst people to work for, because he doesn't view the acquisition of a lot of money as the primary purpose, but the functionality that he wants to try to create. So he has Virgin Records and Virgin Airlines. So those are the two. For if any of you all are familiar with them. Warren Buffett is extremely rich, very savvy in his yes, Frank, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
No, I was just thinking. I don't know how accurate it may be, right?
Uh-huh.
But when you look at all these people here, and let me just swap them out and use let me say countries as leaders or leaders of countries,
Mm.
right? Or industries and countries, government institutions.
All right.
It's the same thing. They
Yes, it
they
is.
they do the same
Mhm.
thing.
Yes, they do.
They treat their workers badly, very few. They treat their workers badly. And I know you can't describe a country as being aloof, but they are aloof, right?
Yes, you
So
can
so
actually describe countries as being aloof too. Yes.
so it's the same thing. It's just
Yeah, it is. It is primarily, but what the functionality we're looking at here is how management views leadership. And this is the point I'm trying to make. It's looking at the nature of your relationship, but what they focus more importantly on is not whether or not the relationship is a good one or a toxic one, but one that gives rise to the greatest outcome of profits or the greatest turnover of profits that they have. And that is for me, that is the feeling of this particular system. But it is one of the ways in which we view leadership. All right, Frank?
So that it listening to how you explain how each one where they reach and how they reach to
Uh-huh.
reach the greatest, to me it giving me like to reach the greatest profit you have to be more corrupted.
Well, I don't think the word is corrupted because none. Well, yeah, there's a certain amount of theft that is taking place here. Yes, that's true. And you're not necessarily wrong because in the last 100 years that I've tracked back in terms of some of the richest people in the world, if you look back at their histories, you will find some crime that was at the beginning of their rise to power. Kevin, I see your hand still up. Is it that you wanted to continue or?
No, sir, no, no.
Oh, okay, just remember to put your hand down. Mr. Jack.
So,
Yes, sir.
what I've realized over the years is that people manipulate loopholes, and when they discover certain things where business is concerned, they manipulate that until some legislation or something
Comes up
comes
to fix
into
it.
play,
That's
right?
correct.
And that could take a couple years well before it reaches that stage. And in
Well,
that event, it would look as well, it will seem as though
it appears
these
as if,
people
yeah.
are unscrupulous and this and that. But
Uh-huh,
the reality is no measures were put in place to quell these type of behavior. You know, so
until after
they
the
after the fact, yeah. So they use their brain
initiative.
and
Yeah.
the initiative to manipulate systems, and it actually works.
But at the same point in time, at the time that they were taking advantage of the circumstances, do you think they weren't aware that what they were doing wasn't correct?
Yes, they were fully aware.
All right.
And as a matter of fact, I go even further. Some of these people finance governments. You understand? So
Correct.
yeah,
Yes.
you
Because
know.
they become so powerful and so rich that they are able to influence entire countries and influence politicians to make decisions that suit them as opposed to everybody else, which is one of the things that we have to look at in our own environment here. That how much of the decisions being made by the politicians in legislation is reflective of the desires of the business class in Trinidad and Tobago.
So
All right. Yes, Sion?
all well,
I
most I
know,
could
I
say,
know.
right?
I
So
know a clear example of that has to do with our OSHA laws. You can see it very clear in that. If you didn't see
so
it there, something else.
we had a high crime rate a couple of years ago. It's still
Uh-huh.
high, but a couple of
Yes,
years ago it was alarming.
right.
And they were speaking about more police presence in Port of Spain and this and that. The Doma came out and they had a press release stating that not enough police presence in the city and XYZ. And most of the police were placed on Frederick and Henry Street.
Yes.
The rest of streets heading east. No police presence. Chains were being snatched, people getting robbed, the whole 9 yards where crime is concerned.
Mhm.
But the business places was safeguarded, so politics and tricks.
True. That's quite true. All right, so let's move on to another perspective of leadership, and that is anthropology. Now, this might be a little fresher or newer for us, but anthropology is really a view how particular scientists look at leadership by examining the culture of a society and their language and tools and other symbols that come from our past. Now, anthropology is related to archaeology because in the process of digging up the past, we learn a lot about the societies that existed and how they approached their leadership challenges. And in the past, for example, what you would find a lot is that leaders rose in their societies based upon their ability to meet the needs of their societies. And they will rise to those positions of power because of strength and cunning, their skill and thinking. So those are the ones. And then eventually we ran into a situation where one particular family stayed in power primarily through making certain that their children were the ones to inherit. So you had this lineage approach to leadership, and we'll come across that in a lot more detail as we move forward. So anthropology is another method of looking at it. Now think 1,000 years from now, what if we were, well, if you know we had some sort of disaster and whatnot, what would be linguistically and physically, that's the physical anthropology, um, would be left of us from that period? Anybody? From this period moving forward. Think about
So
it.
could you repeat the question again,
The
please?
question is, if we think 1,000 years in the future, what would be the language and physical anthropology of our society from a cultural point of view? What do you think? What would be our language? Well, a lot of it might be emojis and text assumptions, and
Social media language.
everybody will be holding one of these in their hand and clutching it, because this has become the our means of doing everything. Not so? In terms, you have to think about it from that perspective, because if you understand, archaeologists discovering human beings, and around them is surrounded all the things that they've utilized. This is especially if somebody got buried. They get buried with things that they took with them, onto the next life. This is especially for cultures that believe in the next life, as opposed to our culture, different cultures now that believe in another life, but you can't take things with you kind of situation. But there's still people to this day, when they get married, they want this to go with them and they want that to go with them. Is that whole kind of thing. And if you think about it from that perspective, um, if somebody 1,000 years from now digs up the graves and remnants of our society, what will they find? Uh, think about it from that perspective. Jack, you had a question. I see your hands up again. Or you left it up from the previous time. I took it like that's the case. All right,
Yes,
so we understand the anthropology. Yes, go ahead. Who was
yeah,
it?
that was from before.
Right, but yeah, remember to put it down next time.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Uh,
So
well, no.
linguistically,
Uh-huh.
I don't. Right. Before that time, I know the linguistics would have changed in terms of how we say things and the new slangs
Yeah.
and all of that influence our language and the way we speak and communicate.
Yeah, but what would survive without us being around? That's the thing.
What will survive without us being
Us
around?
being around, because remember the
The,
spoken word would not be there anymore.
the earth.
No, no, no. When I say in terms of language,
Nature.
no. In terms of language, what remains of us if we are no longer around would be what we've printed and put down. You
Yeah,
understand?
well, yeah. What we documented, sir.
Right. It wouldn't be the spoken word, it'll only be what we've written and placed in pamphlets and books and carvings and that kind of stuff. That is what's that remember you have to remember, all of the language from the past that we've been able to gather is never spoken word. It's always what was carved on walls, on rocks, on different artifacts. That was the language we got coming forward. All right, so you'd go to some places and see things that look like this, and you'd have to work out, well, what is the meaning of these carvings, and what are they trying to say about their societies? And those are the kind of things that would be utilized to measure our environment. And basically, when you get something like this and you can't power it up, what are they going to find? Even if they could power it up because of advanced technology, what are they going to find? Apps with all kind of nonsense in it, and emojis and people jumping around naked all over the place. Yeah, you understand? Somebody had a hand up. Sorry, I missed it. Who was that?
Yeah, so that was me. I think
Kevin.
technology is to our detriment if that is the case, because
Well,
if we writing now on what we log in right now is soft copies basically,
correct. Yeah, but I
right?
mean, the data should last. I mean, and we'd hope that in 1,000 years from now, technology would have improved to the point that it'll be um, backward compliant, I guess. What's the word you want to use? Thing. All right, that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Kev. All right, hand up, hand down. What you doing? Right, remember that. Cool. Next frame of reference for leadership. Another way we look at leadership is through looking at it through history. And this is similar to what we were just talking about. So when we look at history, what we look at in our particular time is the documented activities of important people in important times. So that's what we say, key figures during significant times in history or when major social movements occur in society. So let's look at this one. What do these four people speak to? Let me bring this up here in terms of significant time and activity. First of all, we have to recognize who they are. So any of you all recognize these people, these gentlemen?
So I seen Hitler.
Uh-huh.
I seen Mr. Winston Churchill.
Correct.
I'm not sure if that is Stalin on the right,
Yes, it is actually.
and I don't know the guy on the left.
This guy on the left is the American president. They were all involved in what activity during this period of time?
All right.
Anybody remembers?
Warsaw.
No, which war? We have many wars.
Second
Second
World War.
World War, yes. And that's where the war was fought in relation to the activities of this mustached gentleman here, Adolf Hitler, and what he was doing. All right.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
so you see, I look at things like this. Now we know what we know because is it has certain mediums in which these things are communicated, things that we have access to, right? So for example, for a lot of us who have cable TV and all these kind of things, we tend to look at ABC, BBC, UNC, PNM, all all these TV stations, right? That are for the most part controlled by these G7 countries, right?
Yeah.
Who of course gonna wanna paint a particular narrative,
Right.
right? So
So have you ever heard the phrase that history is written by the victor?
yes,
Right.
yeah, whatever they say,
Is what
right,
happened.
is what happens,
Hmm?
right? And we even as it exists now, people who in the past were revered as leaders, right? And we look at it even in the US and in some cases here when we had it was conflicted history, I think conflicted heritage or something like that. I can't remember the exact thing of it. Right?
Yeah. You're gonna hit on something that we have to touch on here. Yes.
That these people and in the past they were revered. That statues built for them. Talking about the exploits. Christopher Columbus is one, how he discovered here and discovered there and all kind of thing. It was all based on a lie.
Right. And the whole point about it is that for very large periods of time, we accepted that particular story or narrative as the truth. All right. And there's a reason why we need to question those things because but what we can't take away is what happened afterwards. So what happened after the end of World War II? We had the generation of these three people, the Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin Roosevelt got together as the Allies and defeated Germany. But after the end of World War II, their actions after they got rid of Germany led to the creation of the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. They knew that Joseph Stalin was a dictator and that he was very brutal to his people, but they saw it as a necessary evil. That's where that statement actually comes from. That they had to join with him, and because they needed his fighting force from the Russian side to be able to come down, and that then led to the Cold War coming out of the 1940s, well, after 1945, 1950s and 60s. That led to a whole set of other things that took place, right? A lot of it, which the truth of has been, kept away from us. Let's look at another figure from history. Who's this guy? Because you brought it up, Kevin. You brought up this concept. Kevin, who's this guy? Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, so that's the king.
Which king? You have plenty of kings.
That is Martin Luther King.
Yeah, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Dr.
Right.
Martin Luther King Jr.
What movement or what part of history was he associated with?
Social justice.
Back then it was called something else. Civil rights movements.
Civil rights movement.
Right? Civil rights movements in the United States in particular. Now, of course, that is important for us to remember because it had a direct impact upon us through this gentleman. Do you recognize him?
Yes, sir.
No? Anybody recognize?
Yeah.
Who's that?
That is Kwame Ture.
No.
Yes.
Who?
Kwame Ture. Who do you thought it was, Dixie?
So I don't have a clue.
Kwame Ture. His original name.
Stokely Carmichael.
Stokely Carmichael. Yes, this was when he was Stokely Carmichael, and he's actually a student activist in Berkeley University in the United States, and he brought the Black Power consciousness to Trinidad and was part of the Black Power revolution in Trinidad in the 70s. Today, but he changed his name to Kwame Ture in relation to that. Interesting, where one movement in one part of the country led to a different impact in another country. A lot of conflict. Let's look at these guys. How many of these can you recognize? I think I recognize everybody except 2. 3, actually.
Well,
now, these are what we call influencers. Today, we have influencers who influence the world by doing some weird crap. But these were people who were deemed to be important influencers in history. So we have, this is Franklin D. Roosevelt here. He was important during World War II, and also very important in the American Depression. That's something that I'd forgotten to talk about with that case. Somebody was trying to get back in. Let me make that bigger again. You all not familiar with this lady here, Mother Teresa?
Is that Mother Teresa? Yeah.
Yes, it is Mother Teresa. Influential in the concept of giving back to society and her vow of poverty and giving. She's important in the development of a concept we refer to and that we'll meet in this course called servant leadership. Of course, we met Stalin before, and this gentleman is Karl Marx. Collectively, they are responsible for the development of communism. This is an image that's supposed to represent Lance Armstrong. Is it Lance? No. The other Armstrong, the one who went to the moon.
Supposedly went to the moon, sir.
All right, we left the conspiracy. Yeah, that's when I said supposedly went to the moon, but he is synonymous, influential in terms of the space race that took place or was part of that whole space race nonsense. Of course, we met Hitler already, so we already know that's the rise of Nazism, and his influence can still be felt in modern day society because there's a lot of people who still believe in the purity of races and the white supremacy issues that we come across. Then we have Mahatma Gandhi, who was responsible for the independence of India from Britain, but in so doing also led to the separation or the annexing of India from Pakistan that led to the division between Hinduism and Muslims or Islam. That is and still remains to this day very violent in its setup at some point in time. Then we have down here, this is Margaret Thatcher. Now this guy I don't recognize. I can't speak to him. This is Margaret Thatcher, first female Prime Minister of the UK, synonymous with a period of serious ostentation in the United Kingdom, the closure of many government offices and organizations, and the privatization of many aspects of the UK environment, which to this day, even after she died, was hated by the Labour Party. These two gentlemen are associated with each other. This is Winston, Mr. Mandela, Nelson Mandela, who was the first black president of South Africa after the end of apartheid. And next to him, I believe, I'm not certain, but I think it's Cecil Roach, one of the first proponents of systematic apartheid in South Africa, which is one of the reasons why he's listed or placed in there. We met this gentleman already here in terms of the civil rights movement. We've also met Winston Churchill in the past as well, in terms of the World War II, and which is why he's associated with Germany and Hitler. Then we have Fidel Castro and Ronald Reagan. Well, the collection here already is these three, because it's Fidel Castro, Khrushchev, Nikolov, Khrushchev, and Gorbachev. These three individuals are in and around that whole period of socialism and communism. So Khrushchev was, for instance, very, very outspoken in relation to the dominance of the Soviet Union and its stand against capitalism. And then we have right next to him Gorbachev, who actually led the end of communism and the Soviet Union. And then that left Castro standing alone. Basically, to this day, they still run a socialist society as opposed to that. Ronald Reagan, and then next to him is the other Roosevelt. This is Teddy Roosevelt. The kind of cowboy presidents. In fact, Ronald Reagan is the only president that went for three terms, and it was after him that they actually put term limits on presidencies, because by the time he got into his third term of president, he was incapacitated with Alzheimer's and stuff, and you had that person being taken advantage. This gentleman here, Walt Disney, very influential in terms of the development of entertainment and animation, especially children's entertainment and adult entertainment in holistic terms, the development of the Disney empire. Then we have Marilyn Monroe or Norma J, I think it's, I can't remember, Norma Jean, actually. Probably the most famous of all blonde bombshell movie stars, who has a lasting impression on Hollywood and theater, and well, film in that sense. And then we have these sets of individuals here, the Beatles and Elvis Presley, who have been influential in the development of music since back in the 50s and 60s. So these are all supposedly historical leaders who have influenced long-term change in the world around us. Yes.
So I just want to add something. The part with the Beatles and Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
They stole that music, yeah.
Oh yeah. They all admitted that what they did was borrow music from the Black American
people, yeah,
the blues and that type of stuff. And well, what they were able to do was to repackage it in something that seemed a little more amenable to white people. and that took it forward. But to me, again, like most musicians and other business people, is you take things from one, you package it over and sell it again, right? Which seems to be the way it's done. But for in terms of the amount of influence they've had, and they've actually been able to bring a lot through their actions, they've actually been able to highlight the influence of Black America on the world's music is a really important element, especially the blues and rock and roll and rockability and that type of stuff. All right, so one of the last areas we're going to look at here in terms of frameworks in which we look at leadership is in psychology and sociology. Psychology looks at the individual, sociology looks at the groups. And from these particular perspectives, we, through these gentlemen here, or a combination of these and others, um, one of the most important, so we know this is Sigmund Freud, this is not Karl Marx, the other one. Um, oh, good Lord, why can't I remember his name now? It's not Maslow, Karl Marx.
Taylor, sir?
Sorry? Lenin, I think it is. Sorry. Say again?
I thought it was Taylor.
I think it's Taylor. I'll have to check it back and see. But this gentleman here on the side is B.F. Skinner. They are important because of the amount of work they put into the fields of psychology and sociology. Now, he's a psychiatrist, sociologist, and this is an educational behaviorist. And they were able to pull together a number, or develop a lot of thinking in relation to psych, soc, and education. And they were able to pull together so many theories that have impacted upon the theories of leadership that we will be examining from all of these perspectives moving forward. So we're going to be seeing that in terms of a lot of the leadership theory that we're going to be looking at here. So the question that brings up is, how does your field of study or work deal with leadership? And if, as opposed to your field of study, how would you deal with leadership in terms of your perception of perspective? Now, these aren't questions that I expect that we'll answer here at this point in time. But what I expect is that these are questions you'll be asking. So, for example, most of you all are coming from a military type of environment. So it means that leadership arises through rank, and you must listen to what your supervisor says. But I know there are alternative activities that take place. So how do people arrive in positions of rank? Is either through years of service, or by following the orders of the previous leaders who then recommend you onwards to become a leader and so on. So it means you're playing the politics of the organization that you're working in or serving in. Is that how you feel leadership should be dealt with? That is a question for you to reflect on, because what we don't like for others, we shouldn't like for ourselves, and vice versa. Kevin, I see your mic is open. Is that what you want to say something again?
No, sir, sorry.
Okay, all right. So this is a question I want you all to think about a little bit. Now, before we kind of take a little break, I want to draw your attention to this particular quotation here. The superficial leader versus the reflective leader. The superficial leader cannot see things as they're happening because they're caught up in the drama and the excitement of the moment. And that confusion of what is blinding you makes them blind to what is taking place. But leaders who return again and again to awareness of process will have a deep sense of how things actually happen. Now, this is true because we're going to find that in our examination of the leadership models that we're going to be looking at, we're going to find ourselves paying attention to that particular issue of reflection and looking closely at things and analyzing past behaviors to look at how do we influence behaviors coming forward. And that's going to be important. And I found that this particular photograph here envisioned this whole issue of superficiality versus reflective. And for me, President Trump reflects to me the superficial leader. And this is the German Chancellor, uh,
Angela Merkel, sir.
Merkel, right? I'm going to say Merkel. To me, and I've seen her in other talk shows and stuff like that. When she's speaking, she's deeply reflective individual who looks at process really clearly and understands the implications of what comes down the road based upon our actions today. This picture was taken at the time that President Trump was at one of those G7 summits or G10 summits, and he had walked the United States back from a previous convention by removing all the restrictions that were set aside for environmental controls. And he walked the United States back from them and said they're not participating in any of them because he doesn't believe in climate change. And this was a stage in which he was being confronted, in particular by the German Chancellor, to be able to try and convince him to change his mind. And as far as I can see, his body language is saying there's nothing happening there, because he is scoring points as far as he's concerned, because he's standing up to the world or showing the world to be that he is steadfast in his belief that he wants this because it's better for his country and for his people, that type of stuff. And we're going to be examining situations like this as we move forward. All right, I want to take a little break now. And when we come back, we'll begin looking at the model itself and some of its basic foundations or frameworks that we're going to look at. So I have about 3:49. Let's come back about at 4 o'clock, 4:05. Would that be okay? Gentlemen,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
take a little walk and a stretch.
Yes, sir.
I'll pause the recording for now, and that way we can return back on the recording afterwards. All right.